It was just after midnight in a quiet Virginia town. The wedding was over, the guests had gone home, and the newlyweds were finally alone. Pastor Daniel Whitmore, a respected minister with a growing congregation, had just married the woman he called the answer to his prayers. The ceremony had been flawless. Vows were exchanged, tears were shed, and to everyone who witnessed it, it was the start of a beautiful union. But within just a few hours, that union would end in bloodshed. At 12:42 a.m., a 911 call came from room 406 of the Lancaster Suites Hotel. When police arrived, they found a woman identified as 29-year-old Alyssa Carter, face down on the carpet. She had been stabbed, repeatedly, 40 stab wounds, and next to her, in a daze, sat Pastor Whitmore, covered in blood, calm, quiet, hands resting on his knees like he was waiting for something, or someone. According to the responding officers, he said only one thing: "She tricked me." He didn't yell it. He didn't cry. He just said it, flatly, over and over. What did that mean? What could possibly lead a pastor, someone trusted, someone followed, to kill the woman he had just promised to love and cherish? Was it betrayal? Was it hatred? Or was it something far more complex? Something he had buried beneath a carefully constructed image of morality? Tonight, we're going to unpack it all. From the first time they met, to the moment he learned the truth about who she was, to the rage that ended it all. And the truth behind what happened that night may be far more uncomfortable than anyone expected. Thank you for staying with us here on Cry Vault. If you're finding this story valuable, or if you're someone who believes these cases deserve to be told with care and detail, please consider subscribing. It's one of the biggest ways to support what we do, and it means more than you know. To understand what happened in room 406, we have to go back before the wedding, before the murder, before he was ever called pastor. Daniel Whitmore was born in 1983 in Lexington, Kentucky. The second of 3 children in a conservative, church-going family, he was raised in an environment where faith wasn't optional. It was the foundation. His father was a deacon. His mother led the women's Bible study every Wednesday night. Daniel was the quiet one, observant, reserved. He wasn't the type to get into trouble at school. Teachers described him as respectful, focused, sometimes intense. At the age of 15, he said he felt a calling. He would later describe it during an interview with a local Christian station. "I was sitting in church and something just hit me. I knew God wanted me to do more than just live. I was supposed to lead." By 22, he had completed his seminary training in Tennessee. At 26, he planted his first church, a modest storefront ministry on the east side of Richmond. Within 5 years, it had grown into a full building complete with a worship team, a counseling center, and hundreds of loyal members. Passionate sermons on family, morality, and truth. Heavy emphasis on the sanctity of marriage. Clear lines drawn between what was godly and what wasn't. His message resonated, especially with older, conservative crowds, but he also gained popularity online. Clips of his sermons circulated on Facebook and YouTube, with some receiving over 500,000 views. He wasn't just a pastor, he was a symbol. To many, he represented everything that was good and pure in a time when they felt the world was shifting too fast. But there was something else, something that even those closest to him picked up on. One former member of the church staff, who asked not to be named, put it this way: he was rigid. There wasn't much room for grace. Once he believed something was wrong, that was it. He couldn't bend. He couldn't adjust. Alyssa Carter was born in 1994 in Roanoke, Virginia. From a young age, those closest to her described her as different, not in a way that stood out loudly, but in a way that made her quiet, careful, and often guarded. Her early years were marked by questions about identity, belonging, and acceptance. She was assigned male at birth, but from the time she could speak, Alyssa, then known as Erin, struggled with what she saw in the mirror. In middle school, things grew more complicated. Bullied by peers and isolated at home, she kept to herself. Her journals, found later during the investigation, reveal a young person desperate to feel normal, to live without fear, to be allowed to exist as she truly was. At age 21, she began her medical transition. She moved to Richmond shortly after and started fresh. New name, new job, new friends. She worked as a stylist at a salon downtown and quickly gained a reputation for her warmth and her gift with people. Clients described her as thoughtful, attentive, someone who remembered your birthday and asked about your kids, but she never talked about her past. One coworker would later say, Alyssa kept things light. She didn't like to go deep. If you asked about her childhood, she'd smile and change the subject. You could tell there was pain there, but she didn't want to relive it. She dated occasionally, but nothing serious until she met Pastor Daniel.
They met by chance. A church outreach event.
She wasn't a member, but she was curious about faith. He offered to pray with her. She said yes. A week later, they were having coffee. Alyssa told a close friend she felt seen for the first time, that someone finally saw her as who she was. Not as a secret, not as a label, but as a woman. What we don't know, what no one knows, is exactly how much she disclosed to Daniel before their engagement. The timeline remains murky. Investigators could not locate any messages or voice notes referencing her past prior to the wedding night. Some believe she told him others believe she didn't. What we do know is this: she wanted love, she wanted stability, and above all, she wanted safety. But in the end, she got none of those things. The ceremony was held on a warm Saturday in May at a small private chapel, just outside of Charlottesville. The guest list was modest, around 80 people, mostly members of Pastor Daniel Whitmore's congregation, a few relatives, and a handful of Alyssa's coworkers. It was a quiet affair, elegant but restrained. There were fresh flowers lining the aisle, a string quartet, and in every direction, smiles from people who believed they were witnessing a holy union, one that had been carefully prayed over and divinely guided. Daniel wore a light gray suit with a black tie. Alyssa walked down the aisle in an off-the-shoulder gown, her hair pulled into a soft updo. Those who attended said she looked radiant, nervous, yes, but genuinely happy. Their vows were short but heartfelt. No one in the room sensed any tension. But there were small signs. One bridesmaid later told investigators that Alyssa seemed distracted during the morning preparations. She'd gone quiet, unusually so. At one point, she stepped away to take a phone call, though no record of that call has ever been found. Another friend recalled seeing her hands shaking as she adjusted her bouquet. Then there was Daniel. Photos taken before the ceremony show him looking serious, more serious than most grooms. One picture in particular stands out. It was captured as he waited at the altar. His hands were clenched, his jaw tight, his eyes hard to read. But at the time, no one thought anything of it. After the ceremony, there was a reception at the nearby hotel ballroom. Speeches were given. The pastor's best friend and fellow minister led the prayer. Guests danced. Alyssa laughed. And then just after 10:45 p.m., the couple slipped away to their suite on the 4th floor. That was the last time anyone saw Alyssa Carter alive. The hotel suite was quiet, room 406. A king-size bed, champagne chilling in a silver bucket, white petals on the comforter, small touches arranged earlier by hotel staff as part of the honeymoon package. Security footage showed them arriving just after 11:15 p.m. Alyssa entered first, carrying her heels in one hand. Daniel followed, holding a small overnight bag. There were no raised voices, no struggle, no signs of distress. According to police, they closed the door behind them, and for the next 90 minutes, no one heard a sound. What happened in that room can only be pieced together through forensics, timelines and fragments from Daniel's eventual interrogation. At approximately 12:42 a.m., the front desk received a call from another guest reporting loud banging and what sounded like furniture being thrown. The caller said it lasted less than 30 seconds. When police arrived 4 minutes later, they found Daniel seated on the carpet, his back against the wall. Alyssa was just a few feet away, face down, motionless in a pool of blood. She had been stabbed 40 times, 23 wounds to the chest, the rest scattered across her neck, back and arms. There was no sign she had tried to run. The knife was found still in Daniel's hand. In his initial statement, Daniel said only one thing: "She tricked me." He repeated it several times. Then he went silent. During formal questioning hours later, investigators asked what he meant. His response was brief. He said he found something in her belongings that night, something that in his words revealed who she really was. Detectives recovered a prescription label from a small toiletry bag in the bathroom. Spironolactone, a medication commonly used during hormone therapy for transgender individuals. There were no documents, no notes, no letters. When asked if Alyssa had ever told him about her past, he said, "If she had, we wouldn't be married. That's not something you hide." And when asked why he didn't walk away, why he didn't leave the room, call a friend, seek counsel, he gave no answer. He stared straight ahead and said nothing. The hours following Alyssa Carter's death were tense, methodical, and deliberately quiet. Authorities sealed off the hotel floor. Forensics began photographing and cataloging the scene by 2 a.m. There was no sign of forced entry,
No alcohol detected in Daniel's system, no drugs in either of their belongings.
The knife, a standard kitchen blade from the hotel kitchenette, had Daniel's fingerprints on the handle and Alyssa's DNA on the blade. The stabbing was brutal but not chaotic. It was targeted, clinical. There were no defensive wounds on Daniel, no scratches, no bruises. And that told investigators one important thing. She never fought back. The room itself was oddly tidy. Nothing had been thrown. The bed was undisturbed. The blood was concentrated in one corner of the room, near the desk where police believe Alyssa was standing when she was first attacked. The pattern of blood spatter on the adjacent wall suggested she was upright for at least the first 5 stabs. Then she fell. The remaining wounds came after she was already on the floor. One detective who later testified in court said, "This wasn't a scuffle, this wasn't a heat-of-the-moment accident. This was rage carried out with precision." Daniel's phone was taken into evidence. On it, investigators found a handful of concerning items. A Google search from the day before the wedding. What makes a marriage invalid in the eyes of God? A deleted draft email addressed to Elder Thomas, reading, "I need to speak with you about Alyssa. Something's not sitting right with me."
And a text message. Unsent.
Typed out sometime between the ceremony and the killing. "She's not who I thought she was. God help me." But the most revealing piece of evidence wasn't digital. It came from a journal found in Daniel's desk drawer back at his home. One passage dated just 3 weeks before the wedding read, "Lord, if there is anything in her past that would dishonor this union, I pray you expose it. Let no lie be hidden in darkness." Detectives believe that, deep down, Daniel already had doubts, that he'd seen something, suspected something. But instead of facing it, he buried it, until it exploded in the worst possible way. The news spread fast. By sunrise, local headlines had already picked it up. Pastor accused in fatal honeymoon stabbing. Within 48 hours, it was national. Photos of Daniel in his wedding suit appeared on major news sites. Alyssa's smiling face was shown beside him. Her name suddenly attached to a tragedy that few could understand. In Richmond, reactions were immediate and deeply divided. Members of Daniel's congregation were in disbelief. This was their pastor, their spiritual guide, the man who had baptized their children and presided over their weddings. Some refused to believe he could be capable of such violence. Others justified it. One church member, interviewed anonymously, said, "If what they're saying about her is true, he was tricked. That's a deep deception. It's not right what he did, but I can understand the rage." Another disagreed. "He murdered someone, a woman who loved him. I don't care what her past was. He knew her well enough to marry her. That wasn't justice, that was hate." The transgender community in Richmond and across the state reacted with grief and fear. Alyssa's friends held a vigil 3 days after her death. Dozens gathered with candles and handwritten notes. One speaker said, "Alyssa didn't die because of a lie. She died because someone believed her truth was unacceptable." But not everyone spoke up. Daniel's church released only a short statement, offering prayers for both families. No condemnation, no apology, just silence. Some prominent pastors in the region declined to comment at all. Others issued vague, cautious remarks about truth in marriage and God's design. Alyssa's own family, estranged for years, remained largely silent as well. Her sister, who had not seen her in over a decade, posted a single message online. "We weren't close, but she deserved better than this." In the days that followed, the conversation grew larger. Alyssa became more than a victim. She became a symbol of identity, of violence, of how dangerous misunderstanding can be when it festers unchecked. And Pastor Daniel, he sat in a cell, on suicide watch, not speaking to anyone but his lawyer. No confession, no apology, just the same words, repeated during his arraignment. "She tricked me." The trial of Pastor Daniel Whitmore began 11 months after the killing. It was held at the Henrico County Circuit Court in Virginia. Jury selected, media banned from the courtroom. But every day a crowd gathered outside. Some held signs that read, "Justice for Alyssa." Others came in quiet support of Daniel, holding Bibles, quoting scripture. A small town suddenly turned into a national spotlight. The prosecution wasted no time laying out their case. Their argument was simple. This was not a crime of passion. This was murder, committed out of prejudice and pride by a man who believed his personal sense of morality allowed him to take a life. They showed the jury photographs from the crime scene, blood patterns, autopsy reports, the spironolactone bottle, the Google searches, the unsent messages. They pointed to Daniel's lack of remorse and the sheer number of stab wounds, 40. Not 2, not 3, 40. They called it overkill. One expert witness, a forensic psychiatrist, testified that the number of wounds indicated not only rage, but an intent to erase. This wasn't about survival. It was about obliteration. He wanted her gone, not just physically, but as a concept. Then came the defense. Their strategy was different, subtle, not denial but justification. They painted Daniel as a man betrayed, a devout Christian who was deceived into a marriage under false pretenses. They claimed he experienced a sudden, psychological break, a dissociative episode brought on by the shock of discovering Alyssa's transgender identity on their wedding night. His lead attorney argued, this wasn't premeditated, this wasn't hatred, this was devastation, a collapse of everything he believed to be true. They did not deny he killed her. They focused instead on why. And they asked the jury, could a man raised in a world of rigid absolutes, who saw gender and marriage as sacred truths, be expected to respond like someone else? The courtroom was tense, but not everyone was swayed. In a quiet, firm voice, Alyssa's friend took the stand. She held up a photo, the same one Alyssa had texted her the night of the rehearsal dinner. Alyssa was smiling, full of hope. She didn't trick him, her friend said. She trusted him. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. On the third day of trial, the verdict was read aloud. Guilty, second-degree murder. Daniel Whitmore showed no reaction. He looked straight ahead, silent. Sentencing would come weeks later. On the morning of Daniel Whitmore's sentencing, the courtroom was silent. No protesters, no cameras, no signs, just two families seated on opposite sides of a wooden aisle, each carrying a weight that would never fully lift. Daniel entered in a standard-issue jumpsuit, shackled, calm. The prosecution asked for the maximum 40 years. They argued that the severity of the crime, the victim's vulnerability, and the defendant's lack of remorse all pointed to one thing: danger. A danger not only to others, but to the very idea of justice, if left unanswered. The defense requested leniency. Not freedom, but understanding. They cited Daniel's community contributions, his clean record, and what they called the emotional ambush he allegedly endured that night. Before the sentence was delivered, the judge asked if Daniel had anything to say. He stood, cleared his throat, looked down, and then said, I trusted what I saw. I believed what I wanted to believe. I was wrong, but I didn't know how to come back from it. No apology, no mention of Alyssa by name, just ambiguity. Then came the sentence, 35 years in prison. No possibility of parole before 30. The courtroom remained still. No outbursts, no cheers, just silence. Outside, a reporter asked Alyssa's coworker what justice felt like. She paused, looked away. It's not justice, it's just something. In the months that followed, the story began to fade from national coverage. Another tragedy would take its place, then another. But in Richmond, Alyssa's name didn't disappear. Her coworkers set up a scholarship in her memory, funding for trans youth seeking safe housing or medical support. Her name now lives on in quiet acts of compassion, far from headlines. And Daniel, he's serving his sentence at Red Onion State Prison, a supermax facility in Southwest Virginia. He has not spoken publicly since his sentencing. He declined every interview request. He remained silent, just as he was in that hotel room, just as he was in court. The story of Alyssa Carter and Pastor Daniel Whitmore is not just a tragedy. It's a mirror, one that reflects how little space we sometimes leave for truth when it doesn't fit our personal comfort. How religion, identity, fear, and pride can collide in ways that destroy lives. Not only the lives lost, but those left behind. Alyssa was a woman who simply wanted to love and be loved, to be seen, to be safe, to be accepted for the life she'd built, not judged for the one she had left behind. Daniel was a man shaped by absolutes, raised in a world where identity was fixed, roles were clear, and truth was only valid if it aligned with doctrine. When faced with something he didn't understand, he didn't ask. He acted. There are no winners in this story, just broken hearts. A life cut short and a question that will echo for years. What if we had made more room for honesty, for listening, for grace? How many lives would be spared if people were taught not just what to believe, but how to understand? It's not a question with a quick answer, but it's one worth asking, again and again, until stories like this stop repeating themselves. If you've listened this far, thank you. Here at Crime Vault, we tell these stories not to sensationalize pain, but to examine it, to honor those who can no longer speak and to remind all of us of the fragile line between justice and judgment. If you haven't yet, please take a moment to subscribe to Crime Vault. It's a small gesture, but it means the world to us. It helps us continue doing what we do best, bringing you real stories with respect, care, and truth at the center. Your support encourages us more than you know. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and never stop asking why.